My name is Amitankshu Mukherjee, and the topic of our presentation is on inherent adversarial robustness of active vision systems. This is a work with collaboration with Timur Ibrahim. Our advisor is Dr. Kaushik Roy, and we are from Purdue University. What an active vision system is. A very popular theory in neuroscience suggests that the human brain processes visual information via two distinct pathways, the dorsal stream and the ventral stream. The dorsal stream is associated with functions of locating the object in the environment, whereas the ventral stream is associated with understanding what the object properties are. Now, how do we process this information from the environment? We humans or animals in general have peripheral vision that helps us in understanding where the object is at by using different points of location, which are saccadic points. And once we know where the objects are at, we can focus on them with mechanisms like foveation. Now let's see what an equivalent system in a deep learning framework will look like. We have a distinct dorsal and a ventral stream. Let's take an input and let's start at a random saccadic point. Now the goal is to understand whether the foveated region around the saccadic point is of interest or not. That means if I want to locate the macaw over here, does this region around the saccadic point has features of a macaw? So we take the first saccade, we pass through a network, and we notice that there are no object features. So we discard this point. That is, this point is of no interest anymore. We go to a new point, and again we repeat the same process, and we don't find the object, so we discard that point again. On our third attempt, we notice some object features. That means we notice that there is an object. We still don't know if there is a macaw or not, but there is something over there. And then we try to understand by focusing in. So we carry out foveated expansions unless we capture the entire object of interest. And then the ventral stream understands, okay, given this cropped image, what object this is, and we can train this via standard training to understand, okay, this is a macaw. So again, to reiterate, the dorsal stream learns to localize objects by processing glimpses from random saccades, iteratively identifying important points based on salient features. On the other hand, the ventral stream classifies the object present based on the location guided by the dorsal stream instead of the entire image. Now, for illustration purposes, we have given three different instances of the same dorsal network. In general, only one dorsal network is associated in an active vision system. We are emulating three different saccadic points, and to visualize that, we have given the same dorsal stream in three different instances. The general idea of a deep learning based active vision system. The key components of it are the dorsal stream, which is responsible for localizing the object, the ventral stream, which classifies the localized region. The dorsal stream localizes the object of interest by understanding important regions of the image, and it does through saccadic points, and it moves around the image until it sees what the important object of interest is. And thus, the goal of understanding what the important features in an image are, actively going from one region to another, makes this system an active vision system. Now let's look at how do we use such an active vision system to perform inference, and what are the different kinds of inputs are of extreme interest to us. So first, let's see what a passive vision system does when it encounters any image. So the standard process is to gulp the entire image as a whole with equal importance attention at every pixel through a standard deep neural network. But what happens when an adversarial input is given? Now, this adversarial input can be of any type. It can be an adversarial crafted input as given by this sticker over here, it can be a naturally hard sample which we encounter as humans every day in our world. The other can be something like where we distort the foreground in such a way that it's very difficult to understand what is going on in the image. And for all these cases, the passive vision fails because of its lazy way of processing the input, so which is given by the text over here. On the other hand, an active vision system understands what are the important regions, what are the difficult regions in the image if something is wrong in the image by assessing different portions of the image. So when an adversarial sticker comes, it might get fooled when it encounters the adversarial sticker and the object and makes an incorrect prediction. But there will be other saccadic points from which, if inference is done, it will result into the right object features and hence the right classification. Similarly, for naturally hard samples, since the active vision has this provision of producing multiple distinct predictions based on multiple distinct fixation points, we can have multiple predictions, one of which will result into the right category, and the other might result into some other category which might be correct, might be incorrect, might be mislabeled or something, given what your input distribution is. And the other kind is the foreground distorted images that we showed, which tests the structural fragility of a network. And from this image, what we try to demonstrate is that with an active vision system, the system still can predict different portions of the image given different localized outputs, and which might result into less confident predictions yet less catastrophic mispredictions, where the standard passive network says it's a plastic bag, whereas our active vision system, because of its way of performing inference using two different streams and understanding important regions, it still is able to make a correct yet slightly less confident prediction. So in the first two slides, we gave the overall idea of a deep learning based active vision system and the kind of inference it can perform. Now, with this system at our disposal, what can we do that against adversarial samples? That is the goal of this work. And in the next slide, we are going to give a brief overview of the outline of this work. In this slide, we are going to give a brief overview of the content of this work. First, we are going to look at two different active vision systems, Falcon and glance and focus networks, and give a focused overview to understand the key salient features that contribute towards robustness against three distinct adversarial kinds of inputs. The first one is the adversarial crafted images, and our threat model is a black box transfer attack framework. And then we are going to talk about and discuss the two key salient features of such active systems that contribute to the robustness. The first is the use of multiple distinct fixation points, and we are going to use Falcon as our case study. And the second is the effect of glimpse-based downsampling, and we are going to show this with GFNet as the case study. Next, we are going to look at natural adversarial images. We are going to motivate why an active vision system is beneficial for these kind of inputs, and we are going to present both quantitative and qualitative analysis on these samples. Our final adversarial input will be foreground distorted images, and with Falcon as case study again, we will show the implicit structural understanding such an active vision system shows, and the predictions are aligned to what a human might say when encountered with such samples. And finally, we're going to discuss the limitations and the potential future direction of this work. Active localization with foveation and saccades. The goal of this method is to train a dorsal network which learns the importance of different fixation points. Now, once the right fixation point is determined, expand from it and then capture the entire object through the operations of foveation. This method was developed for the task of weakly supervised object localization. From now on, we are going to refer saccadic points as fixation points. So given an input x of dimension h cross w, we take two random fixation points. And if we start from one, that is the yellow one, due to absence of salient features, the method is trained to switch to a new fixation point, which is the red fixation point. Now, once expansion starts from the red fixation point, it encounters salient features, the object features of this dog, and then captures the entire object through these four different expansion functions in the image space. Now, the goal of the dorsal method is to capture the entire object. Now, to give some brief points of how this method works is that during learning, only the dorsal method is trained. During inference, any pre-trained ventral method is used. This ventral method can be a CNN or a vision transformer. The default setting is a standard resonant 50. The other important feature is that during learning, the dorsal stream operates on downsampled glimpses from h cross w to h dashed cross w dashed, and this is typically 96 cross 96. In the next slide, we're going to see how inference is done with Falcon. So let's see how inference is performed using Falcon. You take an input and you divide the input into fixed size grids. Each grid is associated with a fixation point. Now, inference is performed from each of those fixation points to discard the irrelevant one and to keep the relevant ones. Now, from the relevant ones, you expand and you produce different final foveated glimpses. So you pass it through the dorsal network, which discards the irrelevant ones and produces these four final foveated glimpses. Now, the goal is to capture the entire object, but based on the starting fixation points and how the expansion function operates, you might not capture the entire object for all the fixation points, but you might get different kinds of bounding boxes. But the goal is to get the best one. So you run non-max operation on top of it. You find the top predicted glimpse based on confidence, and then you crop and resize this part and pass it through the ventral network at the standard classification dimension. Please note the background is discarded during the cropping based on the final foveated glimpse. Now, just to mention, during inference, the top prediction is done based on the top predicted glimpse. But there are other fixation points as well, which are not considered in the top classification setup. Now let's see what happens to the rest of these three fixation points. And this is called Falcon any predictions, which we'll see in the next slide. Any prediction setup in Falcon. So we take the rest of the final foveated glimpses, which result from the remaining of the fixation points, pass it through the ventral network to produce different multiple predictions. Now these predictions are evaluated against the available ground truth. It is considered a correct prediction if any one of the predictions match the ground truth. Now, where is it exactly beneficial is that during adversarial attack generation, and especially in a black box transfer setup, the adversarial noise propagates unevenly, impacting various parts of the inputs and consequently influencing the predictions. So even if some of the predictions are affected by the noise, some predictions still result into the correct predictions. The other case is that during challenging scenarios, that is where the image has various complexities such as occlusion, object deformation, as we will see for foreground distortion, also for multiple objects, prediction from distinct fixation points will result into redundant predictions, some of which will be correct, or in most cases are correct. This is exactly how an active vision system, similar to how we humans have, performed in real-world difficult scenarios. And this any predictions is a key feature that results into the enhanced robustness of an active vision system. Look at the inference of another active vision system, glance and focus networks, or in short GFNet. Along with the dorsal and ventral network, GFNet also uses feature encoders to extract features from the input. Now, both the ventral and the dorsal network use these features for their subsequent processing. So the first step of the inference happens when the input is downsampled and passed through the global encoder, and this step is called the glance step. So this is very similar to how we humans work, is that if we want to make a very quick prediction, we take a quick glance at the input and see if we can say something. So similarly, that is what is done during the first step of the inference pipeline. Now, that is not the only thing that is done. It also decides where to look next, and this is done by the dorsal network and learned through an RL policy. So in the same first step, in the glance step, it also produces a set of coordinates based off which you crop and you decide where to look next. Hence, this X2 here forms the input for the next step. Now, this step onwards, what you do is that you also check if what your prediction is. Now, if the prediction confidence is greater than a predefined threshold, then inference is done. But if it's not, then you move to the next step or next subsequent steps, which are the focus steps. Now, for each of the focus step, what you do is that you take the subsequent crop, pass it through the local encoder, produce the set of features which are again exploited by the ventral and dorsal network. Please note both ventral and dorsal networks are recurrent neural networks. Hence, you can see the dashed lines joining the outputs from the previous step to the current step and used to produce the next set of predictions in this inference pipeline. So you do these focus steps iteratively until you are confident that your prediction is correct. For our inference pipeline, we compute all the 5 steps to make sure that it uses all the different fixation points and produces the final output. In general, this method has been used for anytime inference or budgeted classification, but for our adversarial robustness inference, we are going to look, or we are going to take the prediction after the final step. And in general, for GFNet, we have 5 inference steps. So just to recap, you take an input, downsample, pass it through the global network to take the prediction. If you're confident, the prediction stop. Hence, you get to the next step. Now, the input for the next step is determined by the dorsal network. And again, in the next step, which are the subsequent focus steps, you pass it through the local encoders, get the features. If you are confident, you exit, else you go ahead. Now, this is the setup. But again, we will use the final prediction at the 5th instant in this iteration pipeline. In this slide, let's take a quick look at the benefits of each active vision system. For Falcon, since the dorsal network is trained and the ventral network is only used during inference, any pre-trained model works. The default setting is resonant 50. But in our analysis, we will also use different state-of-the-art transformer backbones, and thereby it increases the applicability of the Falcon setup. For Falcon, although the dorsal stream processes glimpses at a downsample resolution, the final foveated glimpse is classified at standard dimensions. Since for Falcon, for inference, different fixation points are provided, we can play around with these fixation points. And with Falcon as case study, we're going to emphasize on the importance of multiple fixation points and the any predictions and the effect it has on the enhanced robustness. GFNet, on the other hand, both dorsal and ventral networks are recurrent neural networks, and the features are generated by different deep encoders, which For our case, we have the ResNet 50. Although in the original paper, they have different kinds of deep CNN backbones provided. Uh, for glimpse dimensions, a very important feature of GFNet is that all the processing by the dorsal, ventral, and the feature encoders occur in a lower dimension. And we will use GFNet as a case study to show the effect of learning in a downsample regime and the effect it has on adversarial crafted samples. So, and we're going to see how this downsampling is very effective against adversarially crafted samples, but has some negative effects in terms of natural adversarial samples. So so from the previous few slides, we delved into a focused overview of the inference pipelines of this active vision system, and we pointed out the key features that will result into the enhanced robustness. But for proper, complete, detailed description, please go through the supplementary material provided in the submission. Also, you can always refer to the original papers. Let's look at the first set of adversarial samples, which are adversarially crafted samples. And our attack setup is a black box transfer attack setup. So for a black box, as the name suggests, the attacker is unaware of the underlying model architecture. They do not have access to the model gradients, and they do not know what the training data set for the trained model was for. Now, in this black box setup, how do we perform transfer attack? So we do non-targeted transfer attacks given a surrogate model, which is a surrogate classifier, or also known as a source classifier. We generate an adversarial sample for that image label pair, denoted as xadv, and xadv transfers to another target classifier ti if the target classifier ti also makes a misprediction based on the adversarial sample. Now, this is defined by the equation over here. Now, the metric that we use for evaluating both passive and active vision is this one. So we measure the non-targeted transferability by computing the percentage of adversarial examples generated using model SI, but still correctly classified by the target model TI. That means it's not transferred, and it's given by the indicator function given over here, that TI of xad, which is the adversarial sample passed through the target model, still makes the correct prediction, which is our ground truth. So this is the framework, and this is the metric that we use to evaluate different kind of transfer attacks, iterative attacks, LGV, that is attack used from large geometric vicinity, and token gradient attacks based off transformer backbones. We are going to look at these attacks in details in the following slides. Let's look at robustness against various transfer iterative attacks. We have done our analysis on the image classification dataset. We have used the torch attacks library for generating different kinds of iterative attacks, and the attack dimensions are 224 cross 224. So let's look at the results. So on the top, we give the clean accuracy of the different baselines used. We have the surrogate, which is ResNet 34. So all the adversarial samples are generated of this ResNet 34 architecture. Now let's look at these results. So we have ResNet 50, which is the passive ResNet 50, and then we have Falcon Top and Falcon Any. So Falcon Top refers to the dorsal plus the ResNet 50 as our ventral stream, and you can see the improvements in accuracy for different kinds of attacks. Also, the accuracy tracks the strength of the attacks, as in for PGD, we can see a higher robust accuracy, but for a more potent attack like VMI FGSM, the accuracy is way lower, and it shows for both the passive and for the active method. Now, as you can see, Falcon Top, the way the active vision works, it already has a percentage boost of close to 15 to 20% across various transfer attacks. But for Falcon Any, there is a further boost that shows the efficacy of performing inference in the presence of adversarial noise from multiple distinct fixation points. This is similar for a cut mix based ResNet 50 model, and we see that for Falcon, a similar improvement is also seen for this baseline. Now for adversarially trained model, which is the best case scenario when it comes in terms of adversarially perturbed images, it has a flat performance across different attacks and it shows that a transfer attack is not the perfect setup to test such an adversarially trained model, but we have kept it for a baseline. Please note, we are not comparing with an adversarially trained model. This is just to show a baseline. Now, glance and focus network, the performance is better than most of the passive methods and also some of the Falcon counterparts. This is the effect of performance or performing in a downsampled regime. But still, Falcon cut mix does perform very well across various transfer attack scenarios. Let's look at the dorsal ventral surrogate transfer attack. So what do we mean by this exactly? So in the previous slide, we showed the surrogate as ResNet 34. Now, what if the surrogate matches any one of the underlying dorsal or ventral structure? Then what happens is that if we use the surrogate model as the ventral or as the ventral over here, we use the transfer attack to attack our active vision system. The second is we use the ventral model to generate the adversarial attacks, and again we transfer to the active vision system. Now the goal is to see what happens when this underlying ventral or dorsal stream is matched with the surrogate architecture. Now for ResNet 50, for a passive method, this is equivalent to white box attacks. So there is absolutely, as white box attacks we know, the accuracy goes down to 0. But the way the dorsal ventral active vision is set up, this further, even if the adversarial attacks are generated based on the underlying ventral stream, that is the underlying classification stream, due to the dorsal's active movement, it gives another protection layer, which is another shield against these adversarially crafted samples. And hence we see the improvements based on Falcon Top and Falcon Any. Please note these numbers are lower than that generated of ResNet 34, but that makes perfect sense because now the adversarial samples are generated based on the exact ventral stream architecture. Please note, for a black box transfer setup, we are not supposed to know what the underlying architecture is, but for analysis, we do this. But for GFNet, this ResNet 50 matches the architecture of the same feature encoders, and this is the given performance. Now, in the other setup, we show auto PGD, and with auto PGD, we generate adversarial samples both of the ventral stream, which is ResNet 50, and the dorsal stream, which is VG16. Now, based on the experiments, we see that generating adversarial samples based on the ventral stream is more effective in attacking our active vision system as compared to the underlying dorsal stream. Now let's look at some of the other results. In this slide, we show transfer attacks from a state-of-the-art transfer attack setup, which is large geometric vicinity. The way this attack works is that it exploits the weight space of a surrogate network to create multiple different surrogate and uses this ensemble to attack the setup. Now we select 1,000 randomly samples from the image data set. Our surrogate is ResNet 50. From the graph, it shows that for both PGD and BIM, that is the red and the blue one, there is a boost similar shown in the previous slide as for the different iterative methods. There is a close to 24 to 28% boost for BIM and PGD respectively. Now for adversarially trained model, which is again the best case scenario for adversarial sample, the clean accuracy is low to begin with, a trade-off which is quite common known for adversarially trained models. But unlike other methods like Falcon cut mix, which we showed earlier, when we combine Falcon's dorsal with the ventral of an adversarially trained model, we do not see much improvement for adversarial samples. But for clean samples, there is a slight improvement. We'll discuss a bit of this in one of our later slides. Now let's look at another kind of transfer attack in the next slide. In this slide, we are going to look at transfer attacks with token gradient regularization. This is a special kind of transfer attack used based on transformer backbones. This attack removes tokens with extreme values and reduces the variance in the backpropagated gradients, which are used to generate adversarial samples. That means the gradients are used to attack different kinds of transformer backbones and can be used based on different surrogate transformer backbones as well. So we follow the setup in the original paper using 1,000 randomly sampled samples from the ImageNet, and these are our given surrogate architecture. Both surrogate and target architecture details are provided in the appendix of the paper. Since we've already mentioned for the Falcon framework, we can use any pre-trained ventral network. We use different kinds of transformer-based backbones for our ventral method. The dorsal method is still our VGG16 classifier. Now let's take a look at the results. So Falcon Sween V2 Tiny and Falcon Robust Vision Transformer Tiny, for both these active systems, they demonstrate significant improvements similar to the previous cases when samples are transferred from these two kind of transformer backbones, with gains nearly 16 to 14% for the respective surrogate architectures. This is shown by the corresponding plot over here. So if you look into the RVT Tiny Plus performance, we can see that the corresponding boost from the base to the top to the NE, a similar trend that we have seen for the other kind of backbones as well. Please refer to the original paper for more details on these experiments. I'm going to show the effect of performing inference of distinct fixation points and the positive effect on adversarial samples, and the case study is Falcon. So first we define what an initial fixation point map is. So an initial fixation point map, or IFPM, is a visual representation that depicts the spatial locations of the initial starting positions of the Falcons. So these are the fixation points that we showed previously from which inference starts. Now, how do we use it? So these maps allow us to visually illustrate the impact of adversarial noise and highlight the significance of multiple distinct points in mitigating its overall effect. That is the overall effect of the adversarial noise. The reason is adversarial noise spreads non-uniformly in an image owing to the imperceptible conditions and affects different portions differently. And we do use L infinity based adversarial attacks. So there are points that are affected and result into mispredictions, but the ones that are not affected result into correct predictions. A provision that is not present in passive vision, but due to this active understanding of different portions of the image is present for various AVSs. Now let's see some illustrations. So we look at different kinds of points: initial, potential, correct, and incorrect points. So we have seen this structure before when we are talking about the inference of Falcon. So we take an image and we have fixed size grids, each of which has an associated fixation point. Now we pass it through Falcon, and these are the final set of points that potentially suggest that there is an object. It's still not evaluated if the right object is there or not, but it says that there is an object if we start our inference from these set of points. Now, if we take each of these points and we evaluate with the given ground truth, then the green point suggests that all of these points, which are cross-checked with the ground truth, result into the correct prediction. So for this sample, all the potential result into a correct prediction. Now let's see what happens when an adversarial sample is given based off the same input. As you can see, the number of potential points has decreased for the adversarial sample. This visually shows the general effect of adversarial sample. When cross-checked with the ground truth, we can see that even these points, all of them are resulting into the correct predictions. So for this sample, we can see that although the number of potential points reduce, all of them result into correct predictions. Let's see another sample. Similarly, the number of potential points decrease than from the equivalent clean sample. One interesting point is that there is an additional point here which is not present for the clean image, and this is an effect of the adversarial noise, which is showing a false positive over here, or uh, another prediction which might lead to a misprediction over here. So now once we evaluate these set of potential points given the ground truth, we see that these points close to the object result into correct predictions, whereas the pink point or the magenta point here represents an incorrect prediction. This specifically pinpoints the effect of adversarial noise in an image. And with these fixation point maps, we can visually show and understand what is the effect of the adversarial noise for a given input. Let's quantify these fixation points as we showed in the previous slide. So we define precision as the ratio of correct to potential points. We perform this experiment on 1,000 randomly selected samples from ImageNet, and our surrogate is a ResNet 34. So the trend that we see over here is that the ratio tracks the strength of the attack, which is shown in the big table for iterative attacks. That means for an attack such as MIFGSM, a lower ratio is observed compared to PGD. So if I see this plot, we can see that for clean sample, the number of potential points is way higher than the corresponding samples based on PGD attacks. And it goes further down for MIFGSM attack, which is a stronger attack. Yet we can see the non-zero number of correct points for the 1,000 samples are here. This quantifies why we see a boost for both Falcon Top and Falcon Any for different kinds of underlying ventral methods. So the high number of correct predictions quantitatively justify why Falcon performs better than the underlying passive vision system on different kinds of adversarial samples. In this slide, we see the effects of glimpse-based downsampling, and we take case study as GFNet because for GFNet, all operations are performed on this lower dimensional inputs, which is 96 cross 96. So we have three different settings that demonstrates this effect. So for the setting one, we see the effect of processing downsampled clean images. That is, clean samples are downsampled and passed through both the passive ResNet 50 and GFNet. So as you can see, since GFNet is fine-tuned and ResNet 50 is not fine-tuned on these lower resolution sample, there is a performance drop, which is very intuitive. Now for the second setting, we show the reduction of efficacy or adversarial noise post the downsampling. So we generate samples at 224 dimensions first, and then we downsample to 96 cross 96, and this distorts the effect of adversarial noise, as given by this table over here. So we can see that after this distortion happens, even for ResNet 50, there is a performance boost compared to what we have seen previously. And this performance increase is just the effect of downsampling of the adversarial noise, which itself is beneficial for guarding against adversarial noise. But for GFNet and for both of the surrogate models, we see that GFNet is performing better than the underlying passive method. For the third setting, what we do is we generate adversarial samples based on the downsampled image. That means we first downsample the image, and then we generate attack based on the downsampled image. And in this setting as well, we see GFNet performs way better than the corresponding passive baseline. And it shows that the effect of learning in a downsample regime that helps against adversarial attacks. It also shows that if we generate attacks on lower dimensional inputs, it has more potency as an attack itself. You can look into further details of the setup in our paper. This slide shows qualitative samples to explain the vulnerability of passive methods. So we use occlusion maps, and for an occlusion map, the dark regions signify the regions of the image responsible for the corresponding position, prediction, basically regions that influence the prediction most. So for the passive system, the input is processed as a whole, which results in different mispredictions. But active system, as we have seen from the IFPMs, that the dorsal helps in localization and the object, the underlying ventral, only classifies the localized portion, shielding itself from the effect of adversarial noise across the image. We can see over here that this fish, which is adversarially perturbed and is mispredicted by ResNet 34 and 50 by focusing on this dark region over here, close to the reel over here, but Falcon makes a correct prediction because based on this particular observed final foveated glimpse, the foreground occupies more portion than the background and hence reduces the effect of the adversarial noise. But there are always hard samples, and in this case we can see that even Falcon is fooled by focusing on the background where the dark region is more prevalent, indicating that the effect of adversarial noise is more prevalent in this area and hence localizing it and further misclassifying the localized portion. Looking at fixation point variations here, what we see is that different initial fixation points produce different kinds of predictions. Now, for this first sample, we can see that even if we rotate or we change the fixation points in different positions, it still results into the correct prediction because of the foreground background ratio being more in this observed glimpse. But if we start from this position, which is more closer to this adversarial noise that we see over here, the final prediction is wrong because the foreground background ratio is less here, which involves more adversarially perturbed region than all these cases. On the other hand, for this sample, it's more difficult even for an AVS to produce the right set of predictions because of how the noise is distorted or is spread everywhere across the image based on this particular sample. We found one particular fixation point based on which the final foveated glimpse resulted into the correct prediction. It is always important to understand the failure modes of an active vision system, and here we broadly divide the scope of the mispredictions of the system based on what kind of prediction it produces. So on the left hand side, we can see that although the correct localization is done due to the effect of adversarial noise, the ventral stream gets fooled. On the right hand side, what we see is that the dorsal stream itself is getting fooled due to the application of adversarial noise, and the ventral stream misclassifies based on the portion cropped by the dorsal stream. The first row presents the correct predictions and the second row presents the mispredictions. So this effectively shows that where an active vision system can go wrong and what are the reasons behind it, which tracks what we have showed in the previous few slides. Here are some key takeaways based on the results presented for the adversarial crafted samples. Across various adversarial samples of different backbones and different kinds of attacks, we can see a basic improvement over the underlying passive methods. Between generating attacks between a dorsal and a ventral stream, attacks matching the ventral stream forms a better transfer attack for active vision system or similar to the Falcon. We can see for attacks like PGD and MIM, GFNet outperforms adversary trained model, while Falcon Catamic shows stronger performance on PGD and PIFGSM than ADVT adversary trained model. The star here suggests it's an oracle method which is specifically designed to shield against adversarial samples. We provide this for a baseline, but not for a comparison. We have seen the improved performance for LGV as well. For TGR, we have shown that how a CNN transformer dorsal ventral setup demonstrates effectiveness against transformer-based attacks. One key point is that using Falcon as case study, we demonstrated how inference from distinct fixation points mitigates the non-uniform spread of adversarial noise crafted using a white box surrogate model via L-infinity based attacks. These attacks apply pixel-wise worst-case perturbations constrained by a predefined budget, leading to imperceptible yet concentrated distortions in regions critical to the surrogate model's decision boundary. Hence, we use initial fixation point maps to illustrate this and how leveraging multiple fixation points enhances the robustness against such localized adversarial effects. Now, with GFNet as case study, we demonstrated the effect of downsampling on adversarial images and showed that downsampling the image distorts the noise along with it, thereby reducing its overall impact on predictions. And this is a specific effect of GFNet itself. So this concludes our setup on adversarially crafted samples. In the next few slides, we are going to talk about the remaining two kinds of adversarial inputs. Adversarial samples from the ImageNet benchmark. This is a benchmark to assess robustness of various models and have proven to be a very difficult benchmark showing naturally hard samples. So the motivation of active vision is that humans assess complex scenes iteratively from multiple viewpoints, a process emulated by active visions to handle the different complexities present in the ImageNet dataset. And this is a principle that is not shared by the current passive networks, and hence we believe that this is another reason for their bad performance on this dataset. And these are some of the samples of and with the ground truth present on the top and the mispredicted output presented at the bottom by the passive baselines. So let's look at the ImageNet quantitative results. So with ResNet 50 as the ventral stream, Falcon improves from 0 to 5.32 as top and 7.47 as any predictions. So this is a significant improvement than the passive ResNet 50 that we are used to see. Similar improvements are also shown for a robust vision transformer ventral method. GFNet achieves a better performance in the passive baseline, but cannot reach the performance of a Falcon-based active vision because GFNet operates on downsampled images, which causes significant feature shear in low object to background ratio scenes, which is a problem for the ImageNet dataset. Also, for Falcon, we use way more fixation points in our analysis that helps in order to improve the performance on these hard cases. So these are the improvements that we see using an active vision over a passive vision on hard samples. In the next couple of slides, we'll see some of the qualitative results. In this slide, we see the robustness across many complex scenarios, a very good application space for active vision systems. So if you have this kind of system on the current smart glasses or any perception system, it helps the underlying network to be robust against such natural adversarial samples, where you can see over here, due to the presence of background, a lot of water, this sample is misclassified into a sea lion by passive method, but due to the active performance of Falcon, we can see that although the confidence is low, it still results in a correct goldfinch classification. And it can happen for different hard samples where you can classify a carnivore as a herbivore, which can be fatal. Also, a snake as a starfish, which can be fatal. So these are some of the good applications that you can use an active vision system for. This slide shows how employing a more robust ventral stream rectifies the mispredictions. So as we can see over here, an active vision system like a Falcon with a ResNet 50 cut mix underlying ventral method rectifies on the mispredictions made by a Falcon with ResNet 50 supervised as a ventral method. This shows the effect of the learning has on the underlying ventral method, and cut mix we know has its inherent robustness properties. And we can see the same, and we have seen the same for adversarially crafted samples as well. Now visually we have shown this effect for hard samples. Like in this case, even with a ResNet 50, active ResNet 50, it says it's submarine, which is an incorrect prediction. But with a cut mix ResNet 50 background, this is rectified, and the correct prediction of an alligator is produced. And this tracks the quantitative analysis that we have shown in the previous slide. In this slide, we're going to talk about the third kind of adversarial input, which is that of foreground distorted inputs. Now, as humans, when we see the foreground distorted, we can say that what the class of the object is, but maybe our confidence will not be that high, because we as humans, we understand objects by understanding the structure, how different parts of the object is connected to each other, and hence our predictions vary. We can say with certain amount of confidence that there is an object there, but we can also additionally say that the object is distorted, something that is a part of an ongoing research in today's deep learning. And that is a fallacy that we're going to show that passive methods have. Active methods, on the other hand, still makes some sort of less catastrophic stable predictions as compared to the passive method. For this set of learning, for this set of adversarial samples, we're going to use Falcon again as a case study, because Falcon learns to capture the entire object, as we have shown before. GFNet, on the other hand, performs inference on certain patches of the input, object-based inputs. So again, we use Falcon as case study because of that. Now, to test our hypothesis, we use two different kinds of foreground distortion. One is image shuffling, the second is composite images. Now, we take these two different kinds of distorted images and we pass both through the passive method and Falcon, and we notice the difference in predictions. So for a passive method, we can see for the clean sample, the confidence is 41.56, whereas when the shuffling and permutation happens, it boosts up to 94%. Even we can see that the picture of this golden retriever is distorted. It shows that it picks up on feature cues rather than structural cues, and hence it's not affected by this kind of attack. On the other hand, Falcon, which learns to localize object by expanding based on relevant object features, it has some implicit notion of structure, and it stops where it stops seeing the features, and hence we can see different kinds of predictions based on multiple fixation points with different kinds of confidences. Like if we observe the head of the dog over here, the confidence is high. It goes lower when it sees the other portion of the dog, which is the torso and the leg, probably a less defining feature as compared to the head. So this shows that although this distortion affects the active vision, they still make multiple correct predictions. And also a good thing is that since it in the clean sample, it makes a correct prediction of a higher confidence. For the distorted ones, it is still correcting the correct predictions, but the confidence is lower, something that we humans also make. Now, for this composite images, which is a more difficult kind of distorted images with the change in background and everything, a DNN with a moderately high confidence says that it's a plastic bag, which is completely absurd and catastrophic. On the other hand, a Falcon, which due to the multiple fixation points, observes and localizes different parts, and when presented to the ventral network, produces various confidences, but the correct prediction is there. Now, even if the misprediction is there, it is still of a similar dog breed. It's not catastrophic in nature. So we can see that the predictions based on these foreground distorted images are less catastrophic for an active vision. And when performing inference, we can choose to discard the lower confident predictions to keep only the high confident predictions. And this threshold can be set to anything. At one more sample. Similarly, here we take this picture and we perform our image shuffling technique, and we create two different kinds of permutation of the same image. Similar to the previous sample, we see that there is a boost in performance in the prediction of the passive method when encountered with this foreground distorted image. Whereas for Falcon, although it produces the correct prediction for one permutation with at lower confidence, for the second sample, for one of the fixation points, it observes only this face of the wolf and it makes an incorrect prediction, which is a Russian wolfhound. Now, if we take a look at it at only this point, at only this portion of the image, we are also not sure as what it is. It might be a wolf, it can be any kind of dog, it can be something else. So what we did is we took this class and we sampled the image in a data set and we visualized what kind of an animal is a Russian wolfhound. And as we can see, the face is actually similar to what is being observed here. And this shows that the mispredictions also are interpretable, and it's aligned to what a human also sees. Similarly, for the other kind of distortion, which is composite images, the background is completely different. And for a passive method, it says completely absurd, which is schooner, which is kind of a boat. Whereas for the active vision, although it mispredicts as a polar bear, with the part observed over here, we can say that this can be of any mammalian feature since it has furs and all. So we are also not sure. So to conclude, through these two kinds of distortion techniques, image shuffling and composite images, what we can see is that although the prediction confidence and prediction changes for active vision system, it makes less confident yet more robust predictions across different kind of distortions. For passive methods, although the confidence increases for image shuffling because still all the image cues or the feature cues for the object is still present in the image due to lack of structural understanding, we see a boost in confidence. But for the same foreground, when there is a shift in background, because of this one shot lazy processing technique, it culls the image as a whole and produces incorrect prediction based on background and other things. So this shows that an active vision has key properties of robustness when encountered with such sort of difficult, thought-provoking distortions. A key feature that needs to be present in the current and future uh, directions of image robustness in deep learning. Present a novel analysis of the inherent robustness of active vision systems across three different kinds of adversarial inputs. We see a boost in terms of performance for both active vision systems against different kinds of adversary crafted inputs on the ImageNet dataset, and we perform this analysis in a black box transfer attack setup. We pinpoint to two key features that contribute to this inherent or increased enhanced robustness. So for Falcon as case study, we see how performing inference from distinct saccadic or fixation points result into enhanced robustness through the top and any predictions. And through GFNet as case study, we show how glimpse-based focused learning at downsample resolutions affect the adversarial noise in a positive way. We also show result on detailed analysis on the adversarial ImageNet A dataset, and we see improvements of 1.5 to 2 times across various ventral streams, especially for the Falcon AVS setup. We also present qualitative results to indicate how performing inference with such an active vision system helps in handling different kinds of foreground object distortions, and the predictions are more human aligned, less catastrophic, and more stable in nature compared to a passive network which has no understanding of the structural integrity of a foreground. So for future directions, what we can see is that there's a potential to explore more optimized white box attacks and defense mechanisms tailored to such active vision systems. And also we can look into other kinds of robustness tests such as domain shifts in terms of the ImageNet C dataset. So Thank you so much for listening to this talk.